Welcome to the Pharmacy Leaders Podcast with your host, Tony Guerra. The Pharmacy Leaders Podcast is a member of the Pharmacy Podcast Network, with interviews and advice on building your professional network, brand, and a purposeful second income from students, residents, and innovative professionals.
So welcome everyone to the Pharmacy Leaders Podcast. My name is Jackie Boyle from the Pharmacy Girl, and I'm so excited to have Sarah Sorum joining us this afternoon. Sarah is currently the Senior Vice President of Professional Services for the Pharmacy Society of Wisconsin, where she oversees member services, communications, education, practice advancement, population health, and many other things. Sarah is a graduate of the University of Wisconsin-Madison School in Pharmacy and completed a community pharmacy residency through University of Iowa College of Pharmacy in Iowa. So Sarah, thank you so much for being on the Pharmacy Leaders Podcast.
Well, thanks for having me, Jackie. I'm thrilled to be a part of this program.
Well, great. I know all of us have different journeys in our professional life, and yours sounds fascinating. So can you tell us a little bit more about your professional life?
Absolutely. Well, as you mentioned, I currently have the opportunity to serve the members of the Pharmacy Society of Wisconsin as a staff member of our state pharmacy association. And I've really enjoyed doing that over the last 10 years. My colleague at the Iowa Pharmacy Association, Anthony Pudlow, was making fun of me the other day when I was promoted to senior vice president, that I was getting up in years, but I still feel like I still really feel like I'm young in my career. And it just feels like yesterday I was doing my community residency, which was something that was really important to me when I finished school, that I have additional opportunities to train. And I really wanted to select my first position out of pharmacy school to be a position where I would be further mentored and really have an opportunity to work under progressive thinking pharmacists. So having a position as a community resident was exciting for me, and to be able to train with the team at Osterhaus Pharmacy in Little Maquoketa, Iowa. And as Bob Osterhaus says, Maquoketa is the center of the universe. I really felt that as a resident and really appreciated that catapulting into my career. So after finishing my community residency, I took a position at a community pharmacy in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. And it was really interesting how I obtained that role. I was actually unemployed when I finished my residency, and it's sort of like your resident's worst nightmare that you wouldn't have a job when you finish your residency. And I was geographically limited. I wanted something in the Cedar Rapids, Iowa area. So at the time, there were still yellow pages. I don't really have those now, but I opened up the yellow pages and I thought, well, perhaps independent pharmacy might give me the best opportunity to use the skill set that I had learned as a community resident. So I literally just went through the yellow pages, calling every independent pharmacy from A to Z, and I came upon Reitzel Pharmacy under R, and Becky Reitzel gave me an opportunity to expand the clinical services that they offered at their pharmacy. And I'm really forever grateful for that opportunity. I was able to grow in my clinical services offerings that year, and that really gave me the confidence to be able to take the job that I have now at PSW.
Wow, that's really an interesting journey. And yeah, to think back of networking, pre-internet era, and how you went about doing that is really cool, because I think there's something that we've lost a little bit with, the ease of connectivity. We're not talking on the phone as much and reaching out to people that way. And I'm really glad, too, that you brought up the unique aspects of community pharmacy residencies, because they're obviously not as populous in number, but provide some really unique experiences that have obviously set you up for success, too. So tell us a little bit about, being a woman leader. What has your journey been like? Has it been maybe any different because you're a woman, or have you experienced anything that has made that leadership process unique?
So it's really only been in the last few years that I've started to think about my leadership journey differently as a woman. Prior to that, I really just thought of it as a leadership journey and wasn't necessarily thinking about it differently as a woman. So maybe that's evolved because my experiences are a little more seasoned now that I'm about 15 years into my career. But I've also had some formative experiences where I've had the opportunity to glean little tidbits of information from a lot of really amazing leaders within our organization at PSW and national leaders. And so it's caused me to think a little bit more about my leadership journey as a woman. So as I started out at PSW, I really was just learning the ropes. And a few years in, I was able to start supervising a staff member and a student. But it was really just that. And I've really expanded that and grown in my role. And I'm supervising more staff now, really talented staff and interns and other students, as well as a lot of volunteer leaders. So I've felt like I've had to think more about my leadership approach more than just winging it anymore. And so things like these podcasts, frankly, or some articles, or I've also found other podcasts, like there's a Harvard Business Review Women at Work podcast that I listen to that have really caused me to have a little bit more reflection over some of the experiences that I'm having. And that some of the things that I'm noticing in my leadership journey aren't necessarily unique to me, that it provides some validation that, for example, when you're perhaps overlooked, maybe unintentionally, for something, or you're feeling like that imposter syndrome, or feeling like I'm not good enough in something, that's something other people are experiencing, and you need to give credit to that and recognize that and figure out how to overcome that. So I feel like that's been something just in the last few years that I've been able to better understand and articulate about myself.
Thanks for mentioning, podcasts are a great way to, I feel like, learn on the go too. I don't know when you typically will listen to them. I know for me, it's usually on the way to work and back from work. I have about a half-hour drive. So when do you fit in time for learning through podcasting?
Yeah, it's really hard, and I've only really just stumbled into it the last year or so. I was noticing a lot of other members of our staff team here were listening to podcasts, and I was like, just never even thought to listen to them. So I guess I squeeze them in like Saturday mornings when I'm getting ready, or maybe just sort of having a moment in the afternoon to myself on the weekends, or like you said, driving time is a good one. So, if I'm traveling for work or something like that, I'll usually try and make a point to download some. I'm not anywhere near the level of podcast listener that some people are. So it's just something like a sprinkling in that I've tried to do, along with sort of reading some things that people are sharing on Facebook or that I'm following on various other listservs.
Yeah, I'm with you. I feel like I'm at the infant stage of knowing what podcasts are out there. Like that Women in Work one that you just mentioned, I heard about it just yesterday, and this is the second time I've heard of it. Before that, I had no idea it existed. So there's so many resources that are out there. Sometimes it feels a little overwhelming. But I wanted to follow up on something that I heard you mention, and that was serving in the PSW. And I know we've talked before about servant leadership and what that means. Can you tell us a little bit more about your perspective on what it means to be a servant leader?
Yeah, absolutely. So, throughout this journey that I've had these last 15 years, if you want to call it that, I've ultimately decided, at least at this point, that I want to do the best that I can to position my team, whether that's my colleagues or our members, to be as successful as they can be and to achieve the goals that they have for their career, for their patients. So I really want to help them position themselves to be successful. And I wasn't sure how to articulate that, if that was, some type of leadership philosophy, but what I've learned that to be is this servant leadership, and or at least an aspect of servant leadership. And I really feel like you mentioned in infancy and learning about podcasts, I really feel like I'm an infant and learning about servant leadership, but it's new. It's a new concept to me, but certainly something that speaks to my philosophy about how I approach my work. And what I would explain that as is that my work is or my leadership approach is that I want to serve the organization or the profession first and foremost. It's about making an impact for patients. I want to do that, and that because of that, I want to lead, and not that I want to lead to be a leader, and that's I aspire to be a leader, but that I aspire to serve the profession, and because of that, I want to lead. So that's really, I guess, in a nutshell, how I've felt about sort of the last couple of years of my career, and how I think I look at how I'd like to approach things for the next sort of phase of my career.
Thank you for sharing that perspective. I know when I talk to students, when I'm teaching them about professional organizations and getting involved, the servant leadership is the framework in which I present it to them. And I really love this one quote from Gandhi: "The best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others." And I've found that so many times to be true, that I've learned so much about myself and how rewarding it is to give to others through organization work or community service. It's really in those times that I find myself most fulfilled. I don't know if you've also felt that way. It really sounds like it has, but I don't want to assume that for you.
Yeah. Oh, that is such a poignant quote. I love that. Yeah, I've definitely found that to be true, but I've also seen that. So, we have the opportunity to work with just a ton of volunteers, and everyone will say, I get more out of my work with the association or for the profession than I get more out of it than what I feel like I put into it. And these are all people that are investing a lot of time and energy into the work that they're doing. So there must be truth to that. I feel that, and certainly is a way to feel reward and fulfillment in your professional life.
Yeah, there's definitely something different, and I don't know how to quantify it or describe it about volunteer work. And it's really cool to hear from, you being in that position of a volunteer organization, how you get to see that and be energized by that every day. That's awesome. So let's go, or let's turn in a little bit of a different direction. What do you think, as you've learned through your leadership journey, what do you think are some misconceptions about maybe leadership, or what makes a great leader?
So I feel like I have learned that you don't have to put work before everything else. So I feel like the way we're trained as students and residents, and maybe this is just generationally, and maybe this is changing, but I feel like the way we're trained is that, work, professional life needs to come before everything else. And you should be expending every last ounce of energy you have and burning the midnight oil on your work and your leadership development and all of that. But I have found that that is not the case, and that you can be a better rounded professional and be more creative and actually lead better when you're not putting work before everything else. I've also found that it's important to advocate for your team, and that's just as important as advocating for yourself, but that you shouldn't not advocate for yourself. You need to be sure you're also advocating for yourself and not just taking sacrifices for the team. So it's a careful balance. So, the that I think some of that is just like sort of ingrained in us professionally. And also maybe it's a characteristic of women too, that you tend to put yourself last and you tend to be a team player and not advocate for yourself. But you really have to turn that on its head in order for you to really sort of advance and really also be healthy and mentally healthy and mindful of the work that you're doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I completely agree. I read one of my favorite leadership books, Total Leadership. Was kind of unlike any other leadership book I've read, but it talks about focusing on 4 domains of leadership. One of those being leading ourselves, and making sure we're taking care of ourselves. Because I agree, I find sometimes my self-care will suffer, and then I recognize that and try to recover somehow. But I love the point you brought up too about taking care of your team. I know around 4:30 every day, I remind our residents, like, don't stay forever, like, go home.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But it is having those teammates to recognize, when maybe you've worked enough hours for the day, or if there's not an emergency in patient care, it's time to call it a wrap. We can always do more work tomorrow. So your team is definitely fortunate to have you around to be looking out for them. That's great. All right. So thinking about women leadership in general, as you've started learning more about it, experiencing it yourself, where do you say the biggest challenges lie for women leaders, or maybe what are some big challenges that you've faced so far?
Yeah, so I still feel like I'm just figuring all this out with the rest of everybody. And so I certainly don't feel like I've got this all figured out. But one of the things that I've found to be super helpful is Mike Brownlee, who's the director of pharmacy at University of Iowa Hospital and Clinics, does a leadership workshop along with Steve Rao, who's the director of pharmacy at University of Wisconsin Hospital and Clinics, at our leadership conference every year. And I have the opportunity to go to that each year as a staff member. And so I get to glean little bits at that leadership conference every year, which is pretty special. And one of the articles that Mike Brownlee suggested that I read was actually an article that was written in 1974 in the Harvard Business Review, and it's called "Who's Got Your Monkey?" And I read that article, and if you haven't read it, I would so recommend it. And it's about taking on other people's monkeys, and we take on the care and feeding of other people's monkeys. And by monkey, I mean their challenges and issues at work. And they bring you a challenge that they're maybe having in their scope of work. And you, instead of empowering them to take care of their own monkey, you take care of the monkey for them. And pretty soon you're taking care of a zoo of monkeys in your office. And just the analogy and the visual of that was so powerful for me that and just hit me at the right point in my career that that has helped me immensely. So I think as a woman, I tend to, I can totally help you with that. Let me do that for you. Yes, I can take that on. I've always been sort of a people pleaser, a yes person. But what I've learned to do is try and help empower people, give them the right tools and resources, but empower people to have the right skills and training and confidence to take care of the challenges and barriers that they're presented with. So when they bring me an issue, trying to help them troubleshoot and problem solve through that, and then empower them to take care of that. And that has been just like work changing for me. So that's been something that I felt really valuable. But another challenge that I struggle with is one I mentioned just earlier, and that's sort of this imposter syndrome challenge of, am I really supposed to be here? Do I know enough to be having these conversations? Am I a good enough leader to be interviewed for the podcast? And Those kinds of things that enter our minds on a daily, weekly, yearly basis. And what I've found to be helpful with that is to just throw myself out there a bit every once in a while. So when I was asked to do this podcast, I said, I don't know. There's probably like a dozen people I could think of that would be better to be interviewed. I thought, well, why not? I'll give it a shot. And so kind of getting outside that comfort zone and stretching myself a little bit further has been a strategy I've tried to overcome that challenge with.
Oh my gosh. Well, number one, you're definitely qualified to be on this podcast. And that resonated with me so much. I remember when Tony Guerra, who is the leader of this podcast, asked me to host, I was like, what? Who are you sure? Are you making a mistake? Like, are you talking to the right person? So I think the recognition that others do feel this way, and that, pushing yourself out of your comfort zone and then gaining that experience and reflecting back on it to say, hey, I didn't die. Like, it was a good experience and I learned a lot from it and I gained some confidence. So absolutely. I was honored to have you as my guest. And secondly, I've never heard of that article. I need to find it now. So HBR, Who's Got My Monkey, you said?
Yeah, if you just Google HBR, Who's Got the Monkey, apparently it's one of the top best-selling reprints that the Harvard Business Review has ever put out. I think they reprinted it in like 1999. Now, the terminology they use is actually quite starkly different than we would use now. I mean, they talk about subordinates and terminology we wouldn't use today, but the concepts are still super relevant. And the visual imagery that it provides is just like so right on.
Oh yeah. I'm imagining like a room full of crazy monkeys and trying to tame them and trying to take care of my own, which just is visually hilarious, but also, also chaotic. So, all right, I'm going to try to find it and I'll link it to our show notes so that listeners can check it out too, because I know I'm definitely going to read it after today. So thanks for sharing that. So flipping it to a more positive note, where do you think women leaders have opportunities in our profession or beyond?
Yeah, there's so many exciting things happening in pharmacy practice right now. And I think the opportunities for women leaders are really in a variety of sectors. I get a little discouraged when I talk to some of the fourth-year pharmacy students that we have coming through our rotation site, and they're interested in doing something really clinical, and they want to have strong relationships with patients, and their mindset is totally focused on one type of practice setting, and that's the only type of practice setting that they're able to achieve that in. And there's just such an array of opportunities out there that I think people don't get a lot of exposure to. So we have opportunities to work within like public and population health. We have a member who is in the C-suite at a health system, and he's the chief of population health, and he's a pharmacist. And having him at some of those tables has been amazing for the profession of pharmacy in our state. And the business and innovation sectors, and thinking about the use of technology and apps and adherence is just a huge opportunity. There's just growing in the tech sector opportunities for medication adherence and helping patients with their medications at home, and using electronic health records and informatics and medication safety opportunities, and things that may not be necessarily like traditionally within the scope of pharmacy practice. Maybe nursing has done it previously, but maybe pharmacists play a huge role in that sector and could be a great opportunity for to be at that table, and would do great things for the profession. So it's not just unique to women pharmacists, certainly any pharmacist, but those are wonderful opportunities for women that provide career flexibility, career innovation. I think build upon the skill set of women of thinking creatively and thinking broadly and being a collaborator. So just a couple of areas that I thought of.
Yeah, it's yet another plug for getting involved in professional organizations, right? You can get exposed to all these different pharmacists who are in innovative roles, or can talk to other colleagues that are designing and imagining new roles that we don't even know of yet. So it's great to hear some of the very unique things that you guys have going on in Wisconsin. I have heard of a few other individuals in some similar positions, but yeah, wow, population health, or the chief of population health, I had not heard of that one before, and it's nice to see that pharmacists are leading the way. So thinking back, let's say you wanted to talk to younger Sarah about what leadership is, or give some advice to yourself when you were younger. What's one big thing that you would have told yourself in the past?
Yeah, so I'd say that it's not just professional success that's something to aspire to. So professional success is awesome, but that's not the only thing to aspire to. And I would tell my younger self that I have made a wonderful career decision in my life partner. I have a wonderful, supportive husband. Last week, when I was preparing for this podcast, my daughter Emily came and sold Girl Scout cookies at our office, and my husband came and picked her up and went to a volunteer meeting at our elementary school. And it's really been the best career decision I could have made. And so I think when I was younger, I was thinking about professional success solely as the driver of where I wanted to be, and realizing now that success is broader than that, and having some excitement around feeling like I've got to a place where I have a lot of great things happening.
Yeah, that reminds me of a quote from Sheryl Sandberg in Lean In. She said, "The most important career decision you'll make is who your life partner is." And I've talked with other women about this because I feel lucky to have a very supportive husband who, without him, this wouldn't be possible. Like, I wouldn't have a successful career, I don't think. So thinking more broadly about what success looks like, and that it isn't just limited to what we achieve at work. It's, how we take care of our important relationships and bring those into our professional life. So I know we wanted to keep this around 30 minutes. So wanted to ask just two more questions. So how do you think women can best help support each other in our profession or in leadership experiences?
So I saw a great quote the other day. I don't know who said it, but it was just sort of one of those memes that comes across Facebook. It was "Empowered women empower women." Mm-hmm. So I think the best thing that we can do as women leaders or as women in pharmacy is to help to empower each other. And by being empowered, we can help empower others. So helping to provide opportunities, providing props to one another, and then also not apologizing for being successful, and having some leadership skill, and not feeling apologetic for that. It's a great thing. So feeling that empowering of each other, I think, is something that we can do for one another.
Yes. So putting each other in the spotlight. And I know in a past episode, I talked with Elena about that as well. And saying thank you, taking, credit for our leadership accomplishments. I think that's something that we may do more often, is discredit our accomplishments too. So we're going to wrap up here, but I know, being a servant leader, likely you've mentored and developed other servant leaders in your role. So how do you do it? How do you inspire others to serve and give back to their profession in your capacity at PSW, or even beyond that?
Yeah, I'd say just leading by example, and trying to also make it fun along the way. So people are more likely to to want to be a part of something if it's enjoyable and as part of their work-life integration, if you will. So that's really what I aspire to do, is really just to help show people that it can be a good time and can help build great, long-lasting, lifelong relationships.
That's wonderful. And I am certain that you are inspiring many current and future pharmacists to do great things in our profession. Well, thank you, Sarah, so much for taking some time out to be on the Pharmacy Leaders podcast. We really appreciate you donating time back to the profession again in a different venue.
Thanks so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Support for this episode comes from the audiobook Memorizing Pharmacology, a relaxed approach. With over 9,000 sales in the United States, United Kingdom, and Australia, it's the go-to resource to ease the pharmacology challenge. Available on Audible, iTunes, and Amazon.com, in print, ebook, and audiobook. Thank you for listening to the Pharmacy Leaders Podcast with your host, Tony Guerra. Be sure to share the show with the hashtag #PharmacyLeaders.